Alrighty, I know some people might still trickle in these first couple of minutes, but that's okay. We will go ahead and get started with some intros. So first, I want to say thank you guys so much for joining us today. First of all, this is our first Scaled Consulting webinar, so thank you guys. It really means a lot to us for you guys to be here. And second, we're really proud of the number of leaders who have stepped up and really taken the time to realize that this is a real issue in most organizations. Technology adoption is something that should not be confused with technology implementation, but it frequently is. So I'm super excited to let you all listen as Ryan Johns explains how to tactically improve this issue. Ryan is our Director of Partnerships and Corporate Strategy here at Skaled. So he works with both our service and technology partners on change management strategies, which means post-implementation, strategic alliances, and also technology strategies. Ryan not only manages our relationships with these partners, but he also helps guide our clients to the right partnerships themselves, the ones that make sense for where they're heading in terms of scaling and optimizing their businesses. And I am Emily, I'm your moderator today. At Skaled, I manage our inbound marketing efforts and help all of our clients and prospects alike really understand why Skaled might make sense for their business. I wanted to say a quick housekeeping. Attendees are muted during this webinar. However, we will have a Q&A session at the end. You do not need to hold on to your questions until the end. There is a little button at the bottom that says Q&A. You can feel free to drop your questions there at any time and we'll circle back to them at the end. We'll do about 30 minutes of a presentation with Ryan, and then we'll have about 15 minutes or so to do some Q&A for you guys. I also want to mention that you will have a link sent out at the end of this presentation that'll give you a chance to do a quick 40 to 90 second assessment of where you currently stand with your technology adoption. So that should give you some identification into what the root cause of that problem might be. So that being said, I'm going to kick this over to Ryan, and I will circle back up with you guys in about 30 minutes. Feel free to post your questions along the way, and from there, Ryan, I'll let you take the lead.
Thank you so much, Emily, and want to thank everybody else for being here. Again, my name is Ryan Johns, Director of Partnerships and Corporate Strategy for Skaled. I have been in the sales leadership, project management arena for probably close to 20 years now. I've worked in just about every industry, every vertical, done everything from ERP, CRM, all the add-ons, channel sales, inside sales, field sales, you name it. And I've done a lot of study over the years in human behavior as well. I really believe this is such an important topic. But what I do is I typically give kind of a disclaimer before beginning any webinar session or speaking engagement. This is not going to be one of those tips, tricks, and best practices sessions. This is going to be pretty thoughtful. You know, there are going to be probably some concepts that some of you may be familiar with, some maybe not. But we found that when we're introducing new things, we want to make sure we give it to you in a palatable format so you can digest it and actually do something with it and make it actionable. So as Emily stated, we'll have about 20, 30 minutes of presentation time, and then we're going to give you some time for Q&A at the end. I don't want to overwhelm or inundate you with too much information. This may end up being like a phased or a two-part session or something like that, right? But again, we know this is hugely important, and I think that's really apparent by the tremendous response we've received on LinkedIn and other communication channels, and also by just the high number of attendees on the call today. The purpose of the webinar is not at all to get you to stop investing in technology. We all know that technology is an absolutely critical asset in positioning organizations to thrive and to perform at what we refer to as the speed of business. Things are always changing, and we're always having to maintain a level of adaptability in our business today. However, what I do want to do is to get you guys to begin to plan better, okay? You got to plan better and become more anticipatory about your approach so that you can get the most out of your technology investments. This seems to be the thing that people avoid sometimes because it requires us to actually slow down and it doesn't allow us to do all the fun stuff that we like to do, right? This is going to require a level of discipline. It's going to require a level of focus, and it's going to require a level of commitment. We all have to begin to really understand both the soft and hard cost that poor adoption has on our businesses, and we have to stop accepting this as the norm. It does not have to be, okay? Really, companies that have the ability to adjust their perceptions around the quantified value of their technology tools, along with their expectations of them, those will be the companies that are better prepared for success in both the short and the long game. We've got to think about both of those, all right? So this webinar is really designed to give you a more holistic view of the critical success factors required for real tech adoption, if that's what you truly desire to achieve within your internal org or your customer orgs. But I think it's truly that important. Okay. So this is what our agenda is going to look like today. We are going to take a look at the current tech landscape. We are going to introduce what we call the technology hype curve. And I think you're going to see a graphic in here that's going to be strangely familiar, okay? And then 3, we're going to look at the problem, like the real problem, right? Not at a surface level. We're going to talk about humanizing technology. I know this probably sounds like some goofy marketing slogan, but it's not. And I'm going to explain what that means and how you achieve that. And then I'm going to give you the tactical solve. And then again, we will have time for some Q&A. All right. So even before we get into the current sales tech landscape, I want to take a step back and look at the broader picture, right? We all hear terms like digital transformation. We're talking about it all the time, right? So the IDC predicts that global spend to reach $2 trillion by 2022, when we're talking again about digital transformation. But the question is, what are we really transforming into? I bet a lot of you have seen a slide like this before, right? This is an overview of the tech landscape from an engagement, product and enablement, sales intelligence, pipeline analytics, people management. There are so many tools out there and they are being developed daily. I can't tell you the number of tech developers that reach out to me on a daily basis wanting to partner, and they are international. They're from everywhere. They want us to help them break into the US market, and they have various objectives there, right? But I personally, I love where tech is right now and where it seems to be going. Frankly, if you think about it, it's the reason that all of us on the call have jobs, right? But I want you to think about this. So even with all these tools available to us and our customers right now, the SaaS framework and payment model, it does make it easy to acquire any one of these solutions. But I also want you to keep in mind that that same framework, it makes it just as easy to replace them as well. So this next statement is going to be like for my tech vendors on the call, my BDs, my AEs, my CSMs. So I want you to listen up to this. Unless you all are able to focus on an effort to create true adoption and not just merely acquisition or acceptance or implementation of the solution, you may be severely challenged in achieving what it seems to be very elusive, like achieving that product stickiness, right? So you have to focus on true adoption, because winning the customer is one thing, and we should celebrate that. It's one piece, but the next part of the game is how do you keep that customer? How do you grow that relationship, right? That's the goal. You're probably wondering, like, why the hell does Ryan keep emphasizing true adoption? We know what adoption is. Well, just bear with me, and we'll get there, okay? So now we want to talk about this thing called the technology hype curve. So I'm going to share a visual with you. It's pretty basic, okay? So there's 2 sides to this. I consider like the left side is like right before, well, implementation and before, and then the right side is post implementation, okay? So this is pretty much the buyer journey simplified. You know, your customers out there, they're already researching products and doing their due diligence. You know, we always talk about how our buyers are more informed. Absolutely. And then they progress to evaluation. So they choose one solution, maybe two others to compare, right? They're evaluating, comparing those. And then they get to the probably the most popular stage, I think, pre-sale is the demo. You know, we rush to the demo. We're really, really excited about the demo. I think this is where vendors and customers really over index. And then some we even offer um, a free trial, right? And then if we get them past that point, then of course we move on to the acquisition and implementation. It's time to celebrate the win, which we should. I mean, if you're a salesperson, yeah, you're going to celebrate this. That's how you're compensated, right? But I think we rarely consider the right side of the curve, right? Salespeople over-index on the left, right? But I tell you this: those that have to manage the relationship post-sale are most concerned with the right side of this curve. Hell, even the company that purchased the solution is focused on the right side. Well, I'll say at least the group that stroke the check. You know, they're concerned with the right side because they're looking for ROI, right? These are the things on the right side that get in the way sometimes of the longer term potential of these relationships, right? But make no mistake about it, everyone is looking for ROI. I don't care if they told you directly, explicitly, implicitly, they are looking for ROI. I may do another session around that, but I want us to start giving more attention to the right side because it's a critical um, area that we have to start giving attention to. All right, so now we're looking at the hype curve. We look at the buying process. We know what that looks like. We know that on the right side there can be some resistance to change. There can be inertia. There can be a leadership change. All those things on the right side can make all that initial work almost for naught if we're not paying attention to it early. All right, so I want to talk about again like why customers buy technology. Again, I've been in this game for a very, very long time, and I've seen that a lot of customers buy tech based on the potential, right? Or its potential features, benefits. I'll get into that in just a second, right? But studies are showing that companies are spending millions of dollars on tech every year, but they're struggling to yield consistent return on investment post implementation. Those same studies, right? They also recommend that companies, if you want to turn this around, you need to start investing equally, if not more, into the effort of driving adoption of the purchase technology. So it's not just putting money into the tech. You've got to invest in a process or mechanism that drives actual adoption. Okay, so these are probably some common things we've all heard, right? The potential. Why are you buying this? Because someone told them that they should acquire the tech based on what others in the industry are doing, right? Or it could be the features. The demo blew their freaking socks off. You know, it has an awesome UI. It integrates with everything. Like, oh, we're hype about that. Like, we're excited. Maybe you should be, right? Or they were told that it would transform the way they do business. I've heard all these things, and customers buy into that sometimes. But the thing is, none of these three reasons have to do with the quantified value of the solution. And I keep harping on the quantified value is because that is what will oftentimes keep your if you're selling to a client, this is what will keep them motivated. If I can say, all right, I understand what I'm getting in return for what I'm investing, then I'll keep doing it and I may invest more. It's when doubt sets in and when they don't know what they're getting, they don't really understand what they're getting. That is when you increase your propensity for churn, right? And low adoption. So even on the back end, like post implementation, let me give you a few things that you can start looking at that will serve as indicators to if it could be a churn risk or if the solution wasn't properly ROI. Okay, so think about these things. I want you to start looking at low usage rates, right? Not activations, not how many licenses, but I want you to look at usage rates. Okay, Start looking at slow upsells. If you're getting slow upsell like that, that's an indicator. Or renewals with no add-ons, that's an indicator. Of course, the obvious one is churn. You know, you lose a customer, it's for a reason. It's they didn't see the value in the solution, or you didn't deliver something that you said you could deliver. That again, that's another conversation. Or there are even customers that are stuck in the demo or trial phase, right? They've been in that phase for months. That's because most companies are assuming the ROI or impact. They're not verifying, they're not validating that, right? They often overlook the many variables that will impact the desired outcomes. They become so enamored with the bells and whistles and theoretical benefits of the technology itself. But I think we all know there are very few technologies out there, if any, that are plug, play, walk away. We would like them to be, but that's just not the case, right? Technology is great, but guess what? It's a tool, period. Technology is a tool. The effectiveness of that tool is heavily predicated on two things: people and process. How are you integrating the tech with your people and your process? It's really about how they use the tool. And that's what we really got to start thinking about. Okay. So now I'm going to dig into like the real problem. Okay. So I think one of the root causes of this somewhat epidemic comes from the fact that very few companies are even paying attention to these areas. They're again celebrating the initial win, but not thinking ahead. We do have to learn how to enjoy those wins, but we've got to do it simultaneously while planning how we're going to yield long-term and sustainable value. Like this is where the shift really needs to happen. In my years of experience, I've seen a number of digital transformation, so-called digital transformation projects. They don't get far beyond the initial implementation stage, right? Some even plateau at the pilot stage because of two reasons. One, go back to what I said before, there was a failure to create strong quantifiable value in the beginning. And then two, this is going to be one that I'm going to pause for a second, right? The second reason is the solution was not properly integrated into the culture of the business. Okay, that's a big one. The solution was not properly integrated into the culture. Well, that now we got to look at how do we define culture. I think we have to redefine some of these norms and how we, label certain things, right? And this is not just me talking. This is Harvard Business Review. Okay, um, globally. So when we talk about implementation versus adoption, globally, it's estimated that over 90% of companies are struggling to achieve widespread adoption. So everybody on the call, you're not by yourself. Maybe you're in that 92%. It's okay. We just don't want to stay there, right? Okay, so you're not by yourself. Why is this happening? And this is, again, Harvard Business Review. It's not the technology, folks. The main issue is culture. Okay. And so when I say culture, this is what I'm talking about. Well, I'll tell you what I'm not talking about first. Culture is not your mission statement. Culture is not your vision. Culture is not what you aspire to be as it's written on your company webpage. It sounds good, but that's not your culture. And it's not for some of you companies out there, I've visited some awesome facilities, right? But it's not how many times you can play ping pong or Pac-Man or eat free snacks either. That's not culture. I mean, that could be a part of it. That can be a contributor to culture, but it's not the essence of what culture truly is. And so I'm going to define these things for you. Like we're going to look at what culture is. We're going to look at implementation and adoption. So redefining the norms. So if we look at culture based on Merriam-Webster's definition, okay, culture is a set of shared attitudes, values, goals, and practices that characterizes an institution or organization. Take it a step further. Culture is the motivations, the perceptions, and the consistent behaviors, aka habits, right? That's your consistent behavior. Those are habits that permeate your organization, business unit, or community. Implementation is basically determining the technical feasibility, the installation, the training. There's maybe some best practices training. That's implementation. That's not like adoption. That's not what we're really talking about here. And adoption, if you want to look at the true definition, that was derived from a French word. adopter, meaning to choose for oneself. It's really the act of taking something as your own, and this requires a change in habits. Okay, so I'm going to focus on that for just a second. So now we're going to look at like humanizing technology. What the hell is that? What does it mean? Again, we're talking about technology and habits. We're talking about technology and culture. People are the culture. They have habits. So what humanizing technology means is this. It is the method by which you infuse technology into the fiber of the culture. And again, culture based on the definition that I just gave you, not the other things that we, use interchangeably and we call culture. This is what I'm talking about, okay? And so in order to understand how to do that, we have to take a look at the attributes of each. So we're going to look at the attributes of technology. We're going to look at the attributes of human behavior. Let's compare these two for a quick second. So aligning technology with innate human behavior. I don't hear many people talking about this because this is for some challenging. And maybe it's just because there's an ignorance to it. They don't know they don't know what to measure. They don't know what to look for. So they avoid it. And that's typically how it is, right? Across the board. So think about technology. I mean, this is easy. It's a given, right? Technology brings speed. Technology brings efficiency. Technology brings scale and predictability. That's a big part of the value. That's why we buy it. But now let's think about humans because we're the ones using it, right? Humans are driven by intuition. Humans are driven by emotion. Humans are driven by some level of adaptability, but more than anything, it's that last word that I bolded at the end. It is habit. I highlighted habit because this is one of the greatest determinants of adoption, is that right there. So again, we took it from culture, but we want to dig a little bit deeper into what drives the culture. It's that thing right there. You guys have probably heard people say, well, if you do anything for 21 days, it becomes a habit. Not necessarily. There are studies that show that developing new habits actually take anywhere from 21 to 254 days. 21 up to 254. These time frames are really based on how challenging the new behaviors themselves are or how deeply rooted the old habits are. And you know how sometimes old habits are hard to break. I mean, you just think about anything, a new workout routine, a new diet, stopping smoking, whatever it is, right? And then how many times do you have to start over? You know what I mean? That makes a big difference, right? And think about even at a deeper level. If you are an organization that has a multi-generational team, or let's say a mixed tenure team, then you really, really, really need to dial in here and be focused here and be very anticipatory here and think about these areas before you start running with tactics and you haven't really adequately mapped your strategy. Okay. So I know this is the part that everybody wants to get to. Give me the answer. Give me the answer. How do we solve it? How do we solve it? So I'm going to give you that. Okay. So based on what we've learned, again, let's go back. The problem is not technology, but actually the culture. So what do you do about it? This is the solve. These are the 3 A's of habitual change. Okay. Now this can be applied in many, many areas, right? At a surface level. It requires attention, it requires action, and it requires accountability. You will never achieve change without those 3, not real lasting and sustainable change. It'll be temporary if you're not approaching it this way. And of course, I added some more context to this and got a little bit deeper based on the context of the conversation that we're having today. But this is the way to do it, right? So let's look at attention. So it starts with resource allocation. Who is going to own this, right? Somebody has to take ownership. Somebody has to have skin in the game. Then you have to look at time allocation. There has to be a focused effort over a predetermined period of time. The last 2 I want to talk about is this is where a lot of companies miss it, is the baseline and the benchmark. you have to first quantify the current state of the business absent that, whatever the new solution is or new process or whatever it is. What is it costing me today to do nothing? You have to know that first. And then you set the benchmark, you quantify the future, the projected future impact. If you're not measuring both the current and the proposed future state, you'll never be able to accurately identify the true business impact, and your project will probably fall short of its true potential. I mean, that's just what it is. Okay. So, and if this is a phased rollout, and now a lot of these projects are phased over months or whatever, um, the follow-up step would be this. So you map this initial impact. So you take your numbers from the baseline and benchmark, and you map that to the projected business outcomes at full adoption capacity, right? Because again, a lot of these projects start through a pilot, right? So it may be one segment of the business. So you quantify the impact there, but then you also future forecast other areas of the business. So let me explain it a little bit further. So what I mean is that after you've quantified the value / impact of the initial implementation stage, then you want to cumulatively add that number to the projected quantified impact for every other viable business unit. So let's say, you've got a new tech and we want to roll it out with our SDRs. We got 10 SDRs. What's the impact there? Let's quantify that. Then we want to roll it out to 10 AEs or whatever, so on and so forth. But again, it needs to be cumulative. This is what creates a very, very, very strong business case for the initiative that you're planning. Okay. And so the next step, let's talk about action. You have to establish the rules or standardized playbook on how the solution will be used in your unique environment. This stuff is not cookie cutter. And a lot of these solutions out here have a lot of customization. So you need to think about this, right? How are we going to use it? Number two, minimize the disruption in the day-to-day work. Number three, early stakeholder inclusion. You must obtain buy-in and support cross-functionally. I'm talking with your execs, your managers, your users, every level possible. And then finally, you want to anticipate, identify, and proactively solve for the barriers to change. This is where companies are missing it because they don't know how to measure this. And then finally, I would move to the accountability area, right? At the end of the day, whatever we care about or value, we measure. We look at our bank accounts, look at our investments. I mean, we're measuring that, right? There's things we care about. We measure what we care about. You want to measure your usage rates, not just the number of active licenses. This is the true metric for assessing adoption, not how many do we have active. That doesn't tell you anything. That just tells you how many people said yes initially, but that's never going to transform your organization. Okay. And then finally, you want to establish an ongoing monthly or quarterly cadence to measure and assess the overall performance outcome. How do you know where you're getting better, where you're improving, where you may be falling short, where the opportunities are for change and adaptability if you're not doing that? Okay. So, and I'll go back to another piece. So if your tech tool does not offer you the ability to measure usage rates, that's okay. You can go back to leveraging like the rules and the qualitative KPIs that you built within your playbook, like in the action step. Okay. That's how you can compensate for maybe not having that component. But this is it, and again, I'm not 3 steps sounds like, oh, this is, this some folks may think this is easy. Some it maybe sounds scary, maybe sounds overwhelming. Again, maybe it's totally new to you. That's okay. I'm telling you, it's not that difficult, right? Especially if you tee this up the right way and plan. Okay. Most companies do not have an internal team or resource with the bandwidth or experience to drive an effort like this. We get it, and it's okay. We know it takes time and effort. The good thing is you don't have to do this by yourself, right? Nor does it have to disrupt your day-to-day tactical responsibilities. That's a lot of the reason why people avoid change, is because we think it's going to get in the way of what we claim is to be important. You know what I mean? But again, it's very short-sighted, right? But this is one of the most common barriers to change. and resistance to change. Is we think it's going to disrupt, create more work. Doesn't have to. Okay. Myself, my colleagues here at Scaled, we are experts at taking like this perceived burden completely off your plate, right? You can maybe leverage us to augment some of your internal resources, and maybe Scaled's not the answer. Maybe there's another, you know, resource that you could leverage that would be a better fit. I'm not saying, you know, we can fix everything, but this is where we thrive. This is where we do uh, exceptional work and transform cultures, right? Studies have shown, I'll say this, studies have shown that having an outside perspective actually offers the most objective and viable solutions to problems that organizations face today. Right? So there are options. So don't think, you know, you have to accept your current state as the norm. It doesn't have to be, right? The only thing that's not an option is doing nothing at all. Like that has to change, or we'll never turn this thing around. We'll keep throwing good money at problems and thinking that the technology itself is going to magically fix it. It's not that way. So this is what I wanted to share with you guys today. Hope it was beneficial. Hopefully it stimulated some thought and get you um, examining your environment in a different way. Emily, if you want to open up for questions, we can go ahead and do that now.
Yeah, sounds great. Thank you so much, Ryan. So we did get a question during your seminar. We'll start there. So one of the first questions was, it's not as easy to provide a combination approach, both a sense of urgency and change curve. The more complex the change, the more comprehensive the changing scenario needs to be. How do habits help drive both the sense of urgency and overall adoption of change?
Yeah, well, I mean, habits won't have anything to do with driving urgency. I mean, it just, it won't. I mean, urgency is more related to, okay, if we do nothing, if we remain the same, I guess if you can measure the inverse. So if we do nothing, if we keep these same habits, what is it costing us today? And that's what companies are not doing. They're not measuring the cost of how they're doing business today. They've just said, well, it's a cost of doing business. They've accepted it. And so once you accept it, you have no motivation for change whatsoever. What was the second part? I'm sorry. I think I.
No, that's okay. It was just, the question was, how do habits help drive both change, or both the sense of urgency and overall adoption of change curve? So
Yeah.
I
Yeah, I think
think,
we answered that one. Yeah, it's yeah, it doesn't drive it, but the thing that will is understanding the cost of not changing. That's what'll drive it. And
yeah,
that's where we're missing the boat.
yeah. And then Ron Brown, he's asked, at its simplest, it sounds like change management equals expectation plus accountability. If there's a miss on either side of this equation, then there is a gap in managing change. But the who, what, where, what, and how are all shifting. Technology allows people to work from almost anywhere. Workers may rarely go into an office or meet their managers in person, and collaboration may be with people in different countries. How do you effectively drive culture change in decentralized organizations?
Yeah, I mean there has to be, I mean, somebody, a group or person has to take ownership of that. Again, it goes back to ownership, right? Who's going to own that effort, right? And when you think about communication, I mean, there's so many companies that are just so freaking siloed, even small firms. You know what I mean? But again, it's something that we have to commit to. We have to be deliberate about. You have to, again, implement those three A's. Companies, I forgot the number. Oh my God, it was in the millions. It was a study that I saw about how poor communication impacts organizations. It was crazy. It was, maybe, I think if I boiled it down to like the super simple, it was like it costs you $620 per employee, um, for poor communication, and you just take that number and multiply by how many employees are in your organization, and you can kind of get a rough estimate of the impact. Again, there has to be a willingness, there has to be a focus, and there has to be an absolute commitment. Like if everybody's not bought in, and again, if the will and the desire is not there, I mean, you're never going to achieve it. You're never going to achieve it. But the way you create that, again, once we recognize how much the pain or the deficiency is costing us, that's what drives change. If you have poor eating habits, and I mean, why would you be motivated to change until you get sick, or you have some form of disease, or whatever? You know what I mean? There has to be a pain, an explicit, a clear pain that is recognized before change will ever happen, before we can even have that conversation. It boils down to the motivation. Like, what's the motivation to change?
I'd agree with you there. And I think just to add a little bit of color, it's completely accurate that we are moving towards more remote employees. We are moving towards decentralized organizations. And I think that this is a problem that needs to be solved sooner rather than later, is how can you drive culture, even at the core in decentralized organizations? I think
Yeah.
we have to get comfortable with more remote video calls. We have to have conference calls that include everyone in the organization, whether you're full-time, part-time, remote, in office. It really needs to be kind of centralized somewhere, even if that space is in the cloud or somewhere digitally. Personally, I think.
And the other thing I want to add to that Emily, is there can be really no alignment without agreement. I think when we communicate sometimes, whether it's verbally, whether it's written in an email or whatever, there's so much ambiguity in that communication, right? We have to remove that. I can't tell you the number of projects and initiatives, I mean, even on a small level, that got totally derailed because we never agreed on the definition of what exactly it was we were talking about. Like, there was too much ambiguity. It's like, oh, we wanted to, you know, build a collaborative whatever. Okay, well, what does that mean? If you're going to define something, you have to lay out what that looks like. You can't say, oh, we want to be a real leadership team. Well, what does that mean? What does that look like? Let's define the attributes. So there's a measure of really level setting on definitions. Like, if any of you have read Crucial Conversations, it talks about dialogue and things like that, and how dialogue is an exchange of meaning. Our meaning is like all over the place, and we fail sometimes because of like disappointed expectations, misalignment of expectations. So we just have to be more thoughtful and pragmatic on how we set up these conversations, and when we're communicating, like what's happening in those exchanges. There's so many layers. There's no one answer. But yeah, I would say that that's one key piece too, is remove all ambiguity as much as possible so we can all get on the same page, because oftentimes we're chasing different, um, we have different goals and different agendas and objectives and things like that. We have to align on that. We have to be of one mind, of one vision. That's the purpose of having a vision or mission statement. People should follow that and understand what it means, not just in theory.
Right, exactly. So moving on, we got quite a few questions in these last few minutes. How do you identify ahead of time if the culture you are selling into is going to be the right culture to successfully adopt your product? The team that is responsible for signing off on these technology products are not the ones on the ground responsible for driving adoption of the product more often than not. How do you solve for this ahead of time?
Yeah, that's going to be in the discovery process. I mean, you got to do a deep, deep, deep dive discovery. I mean, that's just, yeah. I mean, you've got to. And it's not the easiest thing to do, but you have to understand every business unit, right? Understand how they work, what they do, what they're driven by, how they're incentivized. You got to understand the drivers. You got to understand the motivation and the drivers of every um, department that you're interacting with, right? So you'll know kind of the why behind them making the purchase or making the acquisition, or that's what has to be done. Like, we assume too much. I would say that we assume way, way too much. And again, that goes back to the anticipatory mindset. Is you have to think about, all right, I'm selling this solution. Who is it going to impact and how? And if you're not engaging and interacting with all of those stakeholders, even if maybe it's a champion, maybe the group is too large, you can't interview everybody, but you got to select a champion. But you have to approach it thinking, all right, who does it impact and how? And you've got to touch every last one of them. And if you don't, you will expose yourself to a risk. Period.
Yeah, absolutely. Brian Hamilton Sage asked, Ryan, can you talk a bit more about the measures that can be taken after adoption when there is a change in leadership and or process owners?
After adoption, what measures can you take? I think maybe you can survey, right? I would say that you probably should have more than one contact in that organization, right? If there's a change in leadership, that's why it's so important to really multi-thread an organization and to get those multiple levels of buy-in, like I said, in the action step. Um, Getting that buy-in early, executive level, management level, user level, and stay engaged with those individuals. You got to periodically check in. So I don't know if it's through a survey, I don't know if it's through like an account assessment, but yeah, that has to be done on a regular basis. So you have to be thinking about that. Okay, we implement it, we go live. We got to look ahead 3 months, 6 months, 9 months. What could go wrong? That's where the anticipatory thinking comes into play. Companies that are thriving and really doing well in this space have that mindset. They're not assuming and they're not being reactive. They're thinking ahead. And so that's the best way to, I guess, answer that question.
Great. We have another question here. All things being equal, you have adoption acceptance, you have senior management buy-in, and team that is buying to make change. How does Skaled manage choosing the right technologies? How do we make our recommendations for a good fit for each organization, since it's not a cookie cutter approach?
Yeah, that's I'm probably not suited to, to answer that question. That's more on the consulting side there. So
Yeah, if you're interested, feel free to shoot me a DM, Emily Thompson, on LinkedIn, or shoot us an email, or fill out one of our forms on our website, and we're more than happy to kind of explain the process that goes into specifically tailoring our technology strategies for each organization that we work with.
Yeah.
All right, and we got Colin Mollahan, sorry if I butchered that. What is the future of change management, specifically considering the intersections CX, culture work, agile delivery and co-creation, and analytics to deliver a more comprehensive execution approach? Some context here. It appears that the dated approaches of robust communications plans, or comms plans that might be commissioned, training roadmaps, and unleveraged resource repositories are too slow to keep up with the market and customer demand.
Yeah, that's a lot. Yeah, you're probably right. I mean, the future of change management, I think, is whatever we want it to be. Because again, a big part in change management, it boils down to us. What are we willing to invest and control? I mean, there's certain things that we can control that we're choosing not to. We're allowing the machine to control it. And I think that it just has to be a blended approach. So I mean, it's whatever we want it to be. At the end of the day, we're not victim to this this speed trap. Like it's that's just not what it is. We have more control than what we believe we do.
Right. We actually have a piece coming out with G2 in the next couple of weeks that really dives deep into management consulting and change management. I would recommend that you kind of circle back over to that piece once it's live. It'll be shared across our social medias, across their social media, and our email list. So you should get your eyes on that. From there, I am going to drop a link in the chat. This link is actually an assessment that you can take, like I said, to kind of identify the root cause of your adoption issues. I would encourage you all to take it. It takes about 40 to 90 seconds, depending on how much thought you want to give to each question. And it'll just really help kind of get those wheels turning. And then additionally, there will be a survey sent out after you leave this meeting. That survey just helps us understand what you enjoyed about the presentation, what we could improve on, and kind of how we can make these super valuable in the future. There might be a version 2 of this, like Ryan mentioned, because this is such a meaty subject. So we want to make sure that you're getting as much value as possible. On that note, thank you guys all so much for attending. This webinar will be available on demand. So for those of you who are listening digitally, that link is still live. You are still free to reach out to us at any time regarding this material. Thank you guys so much. Thank you to Ryan for an amazing presentation, and we will see you guys at the next one.
Thanks, everyone. Take care.